don't quite ever know when it begins. So I could be just, mid-sentence, or there could be some dead air to begin the podcast, which is perhaps better than having me talk at the beginning of a podcast. Anyhow, we are on the Dish Deluxe #2. Quick explanation before I introduce my very best friend in the whole wide world and compadre at the game we're going to talk about here on Dish Deluxe, Malachi Hayes. But a little explanation because last time around for the debut, there was also talk about like, hey, some sort of like daily or routine like history podcast today in White Sox History Podcast. Well, it's the season and things are a little busy. It's a little hard to do like a podcast even short every day. In the off season, though, I do promise that between me, Mark, maybe others, who knows, we will probably try to string some together. And who knows, given a typical White Sox off season, not much to actually write about, there might be plenty of time to even string together like 300 of them to run into next year. Getting ahead of ourselves, but again, I didn't want to make it seem like a bait and switch, given the big ballyhooed talk about 8,000 podcasts on the Dish Deluxe #1, which is up on site. Addressing a couple of the most significant all-star games in Chicago and Comiskey Park history, but we have moved on. Malachi Hayes has been nice enough to hop into the time machine with me, and we are going back some quick math, Brett, quick math. It would be 14 years. Happy Mark Buehrle Perfect Game Day. You are talking, or you will be hearing from another person like myself who was at the perfect game. Aren't we lucky, Malachi? Despite all appearances on this podcast, we were slightly different ages when we were at that game. Malachi, I believe, somewhere around just beginning his delightful teenage years. I was a little bit older than that, and as it turns out, I'll flash my tickets. I don't know if Malachi can. I'll flash my tickets. It turns out we were just a few sections away from one another. We had the left field line or third base line perspective on what was a very quick game and a masterful game. I guess, Malachi, first of all, thanks for joining me, and just broad impressions of having really been part of history that still, it has in no way been sullied. There are still very few perfect games in this world.
Yeah, well, always happy to come talk about that. I mean, slightly different, stages of formative fandom we were in, we might say, but yeah, I was, that would have been the summer before 8th grade, right after 7th grade for me. And already being a pretty big, in that kind of preteen, teenage obsession era of just really, consuming absolutely anything that you can about baseball and the White Sox and all that. So, and, to kind of be able to witness that on top of being already in that stage of loving baseball, a truly, formative event, both for my general fandom and also just incredibly validating off the bat as someone who was always asked, why are you keeping score by, being somebody of a slightly different generational cohort here. It's so simple. I mean, that's why it's sitting here right now, and so it's great to have a piece of history, and it's fun to still be talking about it, 14 years later.
Note, dear listeners and podcast viewers, Malachi that was a polite way of Malachi saying, Brett, you should have known better by the age you were at that game. You should have known better than to go to a White Sox game. Hopeful. But here, actually, Malachi, and looking over, I've rewatched the game. I've grabbed some of my exclusive privately taken footage of that game, which I may share with you later in this podcast, dear viewers. But one thing that I had completely overlooked, and I'm one who pre-rebuild era at least, was always adamant about saying, the White Sox, year in, year out, were a competitive team. Something overlooked, perhaps, maybe to the super geniuses out there, they don't overlook it, overlooked about the perfect game and about the 2009 season is at this point in the season, the White Sox were tied for first place. 5 games better than 500 isn't great, but we'd kill for it these days. So this was a team that was really fighting for the playoffs, fighting for first. And despite, when you look up and down that lineup, and despite having been a playoff team in 2008 and, competitive again in, I guess, arguably in the 2010, even 2011 seasons, and certainly 2012, the dropout that we sort of look back and think about in 2009 that happened sort of did and really didn't. This was a competitive team. And this was a first place team heading into the perfect game.
Yeah, that was such a strange year too. I mean, the hopes were really high. Carlos Quentin was
Mm-hmm.
coming off of the MVP season. They
Mm-hmm.
had already, if I remember correctly, had tried and failed to trade for Jake Peavy at one point. And then were about to do so again, just a few days later. And it was, yeah, that was a high. I don't remember there was a winning streak offhand, but they had been kind of slowly building momentum heading into the All-Star break, as they tend to do, and they didn't, as they have since done, immediately lose it after the All-Star break, as they have made a habit of doing. And it was kind of that was a moment where you're like, oh, you know what? Like, it's a flawed team, but it's also a flawed division. There's a lot of flawed teams out there, and it really, for a moment, did feel like a little bit of magic was brewing for that season. It's not quite how it went, but it was definitely a peak for sure.
Yeah, not a winning streak per se as I'm looking over the season, but they were making over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. They'd gone from being 6 down to, well, yeah, this is actually timeout. Hold on, Brett. This perfect game got them into first place. So they were actually a game out going into this game. Winning this game tied them for first with Minnesota. And of course, they briefly did. And then they basically stuck and held within 3 games for about a month. So, asserted themselves to some degree. And obviously, that's a pretty good exclamation point. A perfect game to put you into first place. I believe this is really the only time, aside from the very early games of the season. Yeah. Outside of April, this is the only time they're in first place at all. But again, that doesn't take away from the fact that they were competitive until September, when they bottomed out fairly well and ended up 4 games below 500. But a better team than I think we look back on, because we look at 2008, 2010, 11, 12 as being a lot more competitive teams. They were, yeah, but by hair.
And I mean, what you can say on top of that too is that it sounds a little bit facetious on one end to be like, well, they were always competitive. It might have been an 83 and 79 competitive, but, right. But it's not just. And what separates it now is that it's not just that they were half-assedly competitive; is that they did at least try. Like I said, he made that move for Jake Peavy early in the year. It struck early and it got shot down, of course, and then went and did it again. A couple months later, said, fuck you, you're coming to Chicago. And there was, I don't remember, we've talked about this in the Slack before offhand, what exactly the rumor was of why it didn't happen, or why it happened when they didn't intend it to happen. Bringing on Alex Rios' contract a couple months later, which then paid some pretty significant dividends in other competitive years in 2010 and 2012. That's not something that this current iteration of Sox management would be trying, so you gotta, A for effort is a bit of a, roll your eyes as you will, but it is, given what we've seen the last few years, at least worth
exactly. We'll take it. Exactly. And the delightful aspect of the Peavy thing is, of course, that it was like this foregone conclusion that the Cubs were actually a team that was going to acquire Jake Peavy. And right. The fact that not only the White Sox, got a frontline starter, but sort of like took him right out from under the nose of the Cubs. It's delightful for someone who is still crosstown competitive. I know a lot of people have dropped that habit, but I haven't. What else we got to fight for these days, Malachi? Let's get into the game a little bit. Not shocking, but we will get to the one very hard piece of contact. But not only was there not hard contact in this game against Buehrle, the box score, at least as it appears on Baseball Reference, makes pointed note, and several instances, probably 10 different batted balls as weak, weak pop, a ton of weak grounders. So it's not even just like normal. And that doesn't mean that a ball can't fall in. Usually it is the crazy dinks and weird flares that do fall in and destroy games like this. But almost right from the start, you're getting weak contact. So there's something that he had grooving, both with the speed at which Mark Buehrle worked, but also what it is he was offering to a Tampa Bay, still maybe Devil Rays team that, just, probably wasn't that great to begin with, but, perfection is perfection.
And I mean, hey, they were coming. That was not a bad Rays team. They were coming off a World Series appearance the year prior, if I remember correctly. But yeah, we'll talk about the play at length, I'm sure. And every no hitter maybe lesser no-hitter, every perfect game certainly, always has one or two plays where you're like, okay, that is the game-saving play. That's the one that's going down in the record books alongside this accomplishment from this pitcher. But until you hit, that Dewayne Wise moment in the top of the ninth, it's not just that there wasn't anything even remotely close to that in terms of it being an exciting play. There just wasn't anything that was really even close to a hit. There was a couple, a soft line drive into left field that might have gotten down if Carlos Quentin had been playing a few feet back, and a soft liner that was hit right at Gordon Beckham at third base, but wasn't really
Right.
a hard hit ball by any means or anything like that. It was just really your peak Mark Buehrle, appearance on steroids. Just grounder after grounder, pop up after pop up, and it was in classic Buehrle fashion, and as my mom soon found out, almost kind of easy to forget what was going on because it was so routine about it. If it wasn't so hard to forget.
Yeah. I mean, literally in the sixth, as things are starting to build and peak now, in the sixth, we've got weak grounder to third, weak grounder to short, weak grounder to short. And I mean, this is at a time when, and listen, apologies, Rays. I've got my 2000 Rays on the brain or something, but yeah, they're coming off a World Series. So pipe down, Brad. Obviously, this is a team that could do some damage, could win games, again, whether they were leading with offense or pitching, based on the pitching performance in this game, maybe not leading with pitching, but yeah, certainly a quality team. So forgive me, Tampa St. Pete. One thing I want to pull up here, if I'm going to be able to be both host, mastermind, nostalgia boy, and producer, is something I got from Ramon Castro. As I pointed out to Malachi before we went on, this might have been very well my first piece shot in a locker room, which, by the way, back in 2010, it was still a little verboten. It was still weird to be bringing a camera. I believe that was still a time where you had to go outside and into the dugout to even make a phone call. It's certainly not the media atmosphere that we see even now today, just a decade or so later. So it was weird, forgive the awkwardness of the interview. It's just a couple minutes, but it gives a little insight into a guy who was catching Mark Buehrle for the very first time. And obviously, Mark Buehrle makes it easy.
Basically, I followed the instruction the pitching coach gave me. So it was one of those days, he was hitting the spot and he was unhittable.
Have you ever had that kind of feel working with a pitcher maybe for the first time where you just were clicking that way?
I had the feel before, but it never happened.
Right.
It happened that day.
Right. And when you've worked with Mark in subsequent games, has it been, have you also clicked? Is he a guy that's sort of easy to catch in terms of,
He's pretty easy to catch.
So,
he don't shake. He basically do what you ask for him to do. When you hit the spot, the way he was hitting, it's hard to get hit.
Yeah.
He was hitting the black.
Yeah, exactly. You need a combination, I guess, for a perfect game, of a little bit of luck and, maybe clicking for some of the right calls. So was there ever a time where maybe you were getting a signal from the dugout where you thought, that's right, pretty much everything was...
Yeah, he worked quick, though. and the 7, I was kind of nervous. Everybody was nervous. So I started saying that we're going to do it in the dugout. A couple of guys say, shut up. So I was nervous. I was saying that.
Right.
We have a guy, I remember the catcher, 3 balls, no strike. I remember. So I say in my mind, I prefer to lose the perfect game, but I don't want to lose the no-hitter. So I call it change-up, 3 straight change-up. He threw for strike.
You tripled him up.
Yeah,
wow.
And we got it. And that was the only time I was kind of scared.
You get a little nervous, right? Right. And just in terms of looking back on it now, I mean, it's a place in Major League history for you, and
my kids gonna remember that, especially there was in that game too. My wife, everybody. Hopefully, I'll do it again.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. With a guy like him out here, you never know.
You never know.
Well, thank you very much. All right, let's see if I can get us back on here, Malachi. Okay, solo layout, not solo layout. Let's try to get you. There you are. There you are again.
We're back.
Yeah, that was a year, 1 year after. That's when I had first hopped on. That was the first person I wanted to talk to. That could have been very well one of maybe the first game I covered. And I figured, hey, let's go talk to the guy who's just sitting there, just rapping with his father. Worked out well. Got a little bit of a tidbit to use, I don't know, 10, 15 years later. But one thing that I wanted to look up based on having listened to that again, by the way, I've tried to upload a few things on our YouTube channel. That is actually on there already. So you can, if you are a Ramon Castro super fan, you can look that up and just watch it over and over again. Hopefully we'll get more and more stuff up, including a little clip that I've cobbled together for the second half of our show. But one thing I wanted to follow up on, Malachi, was that whole tripling up and going 3-0 and so on and so forth. Now, it turns out it's not the catcher, it's not the seventh inning, but it was to end the sixth. So you can forgive Ramon for not having that quite straight. And it was actually 4 pitches, one fouled off. So, yes, he did fall behind Jason Bartlett, the mighty Jason Bartlett, 3-0, and then came after him. I am going to guess there were at least 3 changeups in that mix. And as I told you before we went on, Malachi, it's a little hard to tell with Mark Buehrle. It could very well have been 4. It certainly wasn't necessarily. I don't think there was a fastball in there. So that's really bristling up to be able to say, okay, even against Jason Bartlett, I'm going to just loft 3 strikes in there for you and see what you can do with them. And he got away with it.
And again, let's not forget, I want to say Jason Bartlett was like leading the league in hitting at that point or something like that. He was hitting like...
I'm really blowing it, Rays. I'm sorry,
I mean,
guys.
He was batting... That's the funny thing. He was batting 9th for the Rays, and he was hitting... I think he wound up hitting like, 320 or 330 on that season. He was hitting like 340, 345 out of the 9-hole. And I mean, of course, in classic Tampa Bay Joe Madden fashion, kind of being ahead of the curve and figuring out that, the guy... to your credit here, the guy can hit 340 doesn't mean he actually needs to be anywhere near the middle of the lineup. But that's just what made Buehrle special, man, is the changeup. The changeup in particular is such a hard pitch to get a feel for. It's something that pitchers more often than not just do not have a consistent feel for locating, because when you're releasing the ball, with 3 or even sometimes even 4 fingers on the ball, instead of 2, like your natural fastball grip, it's a lot harder to put the ball where you want it to. That's why, or the reason why right-handed changeup artists are kind of so few and so far between. It's a hard pitch to throw consistently, and if you can make it not be your primary out pitch and have something else to rely on, you can. If you're someone who's good at supinating and throwing breaking balls, you might not be super good at, pronating, which is the, twisting of the wrist to throw a breaking ball. If you have a good feel for that, a lot of times you don't have a good feel for supinating, which is opposite, which is the changeup grip, which is, kind of rolling the ball with almost the screwball motion of your wrist. And to be able to do that, go kind of cutter, changeup, fastball, curveball, changeup, was something that made Buehrle special, and to be able to put them all on the black, like Castro said right there. And that is just one of those things that's hard to understate how ballsy of a call that is on 3-0, going change, even for a guy who has great feel of it. I mean, it's hard to put, throw for a strike, much less put where you want it. So if you, there's a, that's why I said I want to keep the no hitter. So I'm not going to throw him a fastball. I'm going to take the risk that he kind of, misthrows, misfeels 1 or 2 of those changeups and winds up walking them, but he didn't, and he got the ground ball, and that's just what Mark Buehrle did.
St. Pete, I want to make it clear, listen, I didn't know what the future held for me. You're near and dear to my heart. Now, I'm sorry to continue to diss you. Yes, Jason Bartlett, after that game, is hitting 338 in the number 9 spot. So I stand corrected, not Punch and Judy, although on that at bat, and I think throughout the game, in particular, the very final play of the game, which of course we'll get to, again, weak contact. So he did make him look like a Mendoza line guy in this game, but he made virtually the entire team out to be that in that game. So all right, I'll forgive myself slightly. Let's take a break. We'll come right back and talk more history as this game gets a little bit more exciting, a little tenser. Everybody's sweating a little bit more, in addition to the fact that it's July in Chicago. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a minute with the Dish Deluxe. It is Volume 2, Mark Buehrle's Perfect Game. See you in a minute. White Sox fans, hello. My name is Brett Ballantini. I was one of the 450,000 people who now claim to be at the Mark Buehrle Perfect Game some 14 years ago today. I am lucky enough to talk to one of my closest friends in the whole wide world. We weren't then. We might have been in the same concession line or waiting to get to a urinal, or we weren't buying beer at the same time. I probably wasn't buying beer at all. Unfortunately, Malachi was slightly south of the drinking age, so he was not doing that either. But who knows? We could have crossed paths at this very game, sitting just a few sections down the line from me at that game. Malachi Hayes joining me for a look back at Mark Buehrle's perfect game. So you are jazzed. You have fallen in love with baseball. You are sucking up every pitch of the game, every sight, every sound. You're scoring the game. You're in the first row. You're first row, 147, I believe. So, I mean, nobody's in your way. You're enjoying the heck out of this game. Now, at what point are you starting to think about what's going on in this game?
Well, I could be wrong. Don't make me out to be too much of one of the kings and queens in the boxes. I think 147, if I remember correctly, was actually an AABB row. So row 1 was actually the third row, if memory serves. So I can still be a little bit on the level with the rest of.
All right, come back to the proletariat with us. It's fine.
Fine. Proletarian. There's the word I'm looking for. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it from the moment the first pitch is thrown. Honestly, I'm there. I'm 13 years old. I'm there with my cousin who had just had his own 13th birthday a couple weeks ago, or 14, however the hell old we were, whatever. And so we're like all over it. We're every 3 up, 3 down, we're kind of looking at each other, nudging. Like there, I will say with confidence, there wasn't a moment in there when I was not fully aware of what was being done. And it's the kind of thing where you look after the first inning, second inning, and the kind of same strain that makes Hawk say, "Oh, you can cancel the post game show after the first hit of every game." It's like you're kind of keeping tabs on it until you don't have to keep tabs on it anymore. And even as early as I want to say it was the 5th inning, one of my favorite baseball memories with my mom was she also was there with us, but she came late. It was me, my dad, and my cousin up to that point. She walks in sometime in the 5th inning, imagining she was only going to be like an inning or two late, coming in the audacity to be 30 or 40 minutes behind to a Mark Buehrle start, and
exactly. It's like it wasn't over.
She walks into, midway through the 5th inning or so. And I want to say the Sox are hitting, or he's not on the mound or whatever, but she's kind of settling into the seat, and she looks up at the scoreboard and exclaims very, very loudly, "Oh, he hasn't given up any hits yet." And it was early enough where it was like, not like, it was like I said, only the 4th, maybe 5th inning. So not early enough where you've got, people pointing guns in her head or whatever, but loud enough that you could kind of hear the rest of the section kind of go like, so that was the thought process there. That was one of the things that made it a lot of fun, was kind of getting to really fully experience that, just never hitting that point where you have to stop thinking about it, when you're thinking about it from the get-go.
And that's a funny thing that Ramon even admits there, because he's like, what he said, like in the 7th, 8th thing, he's like, "Okay, let's do this." And everybody's like, "Shut up, man." And the irony there is that Mark Buehrle, you'd be the one like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah, I know what's going on. I think he's in one of these games, whether it was a no-hitter or the perfect game, I believe was talking about it. And, whether people were running away from him or not, or holding his ears or holding their ears, he's a guy who I think he's definitely going to take the air out of some of these conventions. So yes, if he had heard your mouth, he would have poked his head out and been like, "Yeah, right. Yeah. I know what's happening. I'm pitching. I know what's going on." It's not really going to change my approach one way or the other. I'm still going to just, work fast and try and mow through these guys, for crying out loud. Okay, I will not make a claim that I'm any kind of soothsayer, because I'm sure you were feeling it again as you're feeling every single pitch. But if we go all the way back to, what is it? The bottom of the second, we have a Josh Field grand slam. And I don't think I predicted when Josh Field stepped up to the plate be a grand, although, I'm going to revise it now and say, when he stepped up the plate, I said grand slam. But certainly once he gets ahead 3-1 to a struggling Scott Kazmir with nowhere to put him, you got to figure some good things could happen. And unlike Jason Bartlett, who failed on, with maybe 3-4 marshmallows thrown up to him late in the game, Josh Fields didn't miss. And that was all the scoring that was needed. That might've been the boost to who knows? Maybe it gives Mark Buehrle just enough. I'm sure he's pitched enough low hit games where the White Sox are not supporting him that just getting that 4 or 5 run pad could also make a difference in allowing him just to trust himself and work free through, the rest of the 20 minutes he has to pitch this game because he works so fast.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of a last hurrah for Josh Fields there too, huh? If I remember right, he'd kind of, he kind of came into the year given, the expectation of handling that third base job again, and kind of been usurped by our glorious broadcaster, Mr. Beckham, by that point already. If I remember right, and he was playing first base, but yeah, there was just, and you almost got the sense too that after that, because that grand slam had gotten hit early on. I mean, if I remember right too, Buehrle was kind of famously the only person in the dugout who didn't seem particularly nervous as he got towards the later innings, and was the one who was kind of, getting into like, say, hey, yeah, I got a no hitter or whatever. Right. I'm going to say it, that kind of thing. It almost felt like the rest of the team kind of got the memo, like, okay, that's all their score. We can go, go in, go out. Because you hate to see the thing where you have a pitcher who's just dealing, who's absolutely mowing them down, and you're already up by like 4 or 5 runs, and then you have another 5-run inning on offense, and by the time the pitcher gets back out there, they're cold, they've lost it, and the magic is over a little bit. So it was almost kind of like the offense was a little bit on the same page after that early strike. I don't remember where the other run came from specifically, but I don't remember the Sox offense acting like they had too much urgency on their end after that point either.
No, probably about right when your mom walked in. Alice had a RBI double, and that was it. I believe that is all the scoring. So we're getting on into the game. I don't think Hawk has told anyone to call their mothers and sons and daughters quite yet, but obviously there is the moment, moving into the 9th. Again, no hard contact. So the idea of hearing any hard contact is shocking and stunning. We don't know how to act. None of us I would dare say, none of the 450,000 people in the ballpark on that day could say they'd necessarily been through the magic of a perfect game or even perfect game pursuit. So we don't really know how to behave other than you're not supposed to talk about it or whatever. So, I mean, this is all new territory. Again, as we're getting now into the 9th inning, I imagine you may be on your feet, but what's the emotions there? Obviously, you've been expecting it from pitch 1, but where are you at knowing that you are getting this close to really witnessing some history?
I mean, I can't even hardly put myself back in the shoes that I was in before. I was so like horrifically jaded by this organization that I can tell you, if I was watching that game happening now, I would be feeling, I would be sitting there, I would be waiting for it to get fucked up somehow. I don't know what, but very, very pure, earnest, early, 13-year-old energy, just being like, oh my God, this is actually going to happen. Even at that point, I mean, I don't think I'd ever seen a no-hitter going, I couldn't have told you 2-3 innings tops. Maybe it was, like you said, totally new territory. So, I mean, I would have been horribly, horribly crushed, of course, with everybody else there. Had he lost it at one of those late moments, but that was part of the joy of it for me, was just being so earnest of being like, oh my God, he might actually do this. This is really, really cool. And not having yet been pushed to the point of thinking, okay, like, how are they going to mess this up? I genuinely hadn't even gotten there yet in my formative fandom. So it was really a pretty purely exciting moment in a way that it's kind of really hard to capture when you're not 13 years old and not yet, terribly jaded by a lifetime of whatever your insert team here has done to you.
Right. Yeah. Despite just being a couple of years older than you then, Malachi. Yeah. I think when you're there, it's so much easier to get caught up in it. I mean, I can think back to the Lucas Giolito pandemic season no hitter. And yeah, exactly what you were saying. I wasn't even watching from first pitch, but obviously you start to get wind of what's happening. So you tune in, and yeah, the reactions there. And again, if I'm at the park there, it could be entirely different. I could find myself 90 and jaded and still caught up in the sweep and the romance of being there for it. But watching it, oh yeah, you're just waiting. Okay, what's going to happen to Lucas? How is the team, or how is he going to somehow slip up? Here we almost had that moment even with the Rodon game where it went from perfect to just no hitter because like somebody doesn't move his foot and he gets hit in the foot, and you're like, okay, well here it goes. They'll probably not even win the game now. So yeah, certainly the jaded plays a role. And yeah, I don't blame you at all for being completely swept up. But again, though, despite being older, certainly, I mean, my dad was significantly older than both of us, and he was probably the most childlike among even the three of us, running around acting like an idiot and completely giddy. I mean, as we play something here in our world premiere in a few minutes, I mean, I believe you can even hear him say I can't believe this, or, he's saying that to me. I'm not tugging on his shirt sleeve, saying it to him. So I think it reduces all of us into, that's really pure baseball romance, and that it's Buehrle, and that it's a legend, and that the game's going quickly, and that the team is on a high, and I guess sort of on somewhat of a charge to first place. I mean, it's pretty easy and not a bad crowd. I mean, that's a decent crowd too. Not quite 450,000 is claimed now, but we had not nothing. Not a today's crowd. So that probably contributes too. There's noise, there's buzz.
Yeah, and I mean, and even jaded as we are, once you get towards past the fifth, sixth inning, and you get into if you've seen a pitcher throw 7 or 8 no hit innings, if you've seen a pitcher throw 8 perfect innings, you've seen a hell of an accomplishment, whether he completes it or not. So would it be disappointing if you hadn't done it at that point? Obviously, but that's still, once you get to that point, I think it's something that there's no. Absolutely nothing wrong with just being like you're seeing something pretty special either way, and it's pretty natural to just be I mean, that's I think, especially as an analyst, the thing that's nice about going to the ballpark is that you are so much more in the moment than at least when you're in the seats than you are when you're at home watching a struggling team trying to write a game recap. So it was just you knew you had witnessed something pretty unique and pretty special that you weren't likely going to see again at any case by that point.
Yeah. And as excited as we all were, and lucky as we all were at that moment, as young Malachi is filling out, he's getting close to the very end of his scorecard. He's ready to at least put a W on that scorecard, if not something much more magical. It turned out we were going to get a lot luckier without a brief second of horror. I'm going to try to multitask and multimedia again here. That's the wrong piece. Hold on. Yeah, no, loud. Sorry. We'll adjust that. What was I trying to do? I am trying to. We're working on the fly. We're working on the fly here, friends. Hold on. We're going to put this together. Well, this really is going to end up being fairly melodramatic because is this it? No, I don't know what it is. Sorry. There we go. Is that it? Are we on? I don't even know. Where are we at? Is this on there? Yes, it is. Okay, yeah. All right. Here's the. Yeah, this is a professional host right here. Well, at any rate, the whole build-up as I stumble and trip is we are just maybe 1 second away in this photograph that I actually took with my very own hands and Casio camera. The ball, I don't know if this even appears on screen. This is like gesturing when you're on a telephone call, but the ball has just left Mark Buehrle's hands, and in about 1 second, all of the sound and probably all of the oxygen will escape the stadium, Malachi, because Gabe Kapler will have just made contact on what I believe to a fan, everyone thought was the end of the no-hitter and the end of the perfect game, because it was crushing contact and it seemed destined to really spoil all of this for us. I assume that was also your experience.
Yeah, it's like you said to me a few weeks ago when we were talking about it. You could really just feel the air get sucked out of the entire place. I think, when you go to a fair number of games, you generally get a sense of, when a fly ball is leaving the yard or not. If you ever, go to a game with somebody who doesn't go to a lot of baseball games, and they'll sometimes ask me like, oh, how can you tell like not to get excited on a pop-up that's not leaving the infield? Because if you don't go to a lot of games, it can be kind of hard to tell, from whatever angle you're at, how much ride a ball actually has and how far it's going. But most of the time when you know. And I think everybody in the place, when they saw just the way the ball left the bat, the sound that it made, it had just been dinky grounder and kind of lazy fly ball after pitch after pitch after pitch, and that solid crack of the bat, the way it flew. It was not just that it was, it was a borderline home run, but it was easily the best ball that anybody had squared up against Buehrle the entire day, and everybody knew it. And I don't think, I can't speak to the rest of the crowd, but that was really more just like I didn't have much of a sense of where Dewayne Wise was on that play. It was really just like oh no, watch it fly. Like, oh no, there it goes. Oh, did he actually catch that? So it was a real tangible feeling, I think, of everybody hearing the crack of the bat and kind of having that like, oh no, that looks like that one's probably going.
Yeah, that's leading off the inning, and obviously we're dumbfounded at the fact that the Rays don't have a run, that the ball was caught. The ball was juggling caught. As we later find out, I'm not sure many of us, or certainly all of us, although you keeping score perhaps was aware of even necessarily the substitution that had Dewayne Wise getting his very first action of the game, his very first steps on the field, being an all-out sprint to the wall, which is truly one of the miraculous catches in all of baseball history. I would argue probably in White Sox history. But then on the other hand, Malachi, again, this is part of my hackneyed intro to it all. I mean, this was our win probability swing here, where our hearts sank into our throats. But then once that catch is made, it's like, well, 2 more outs, forget it. I mean, you still had to wait. You're on your feet, you're cheering, you're still holding your breath with every pitch, but you feel after that play is made, oh, this could really happen. And this is probably going to happen.
Yeah, but it is kind of funny you say that. Did he not go? Am I making it up, or did he not go? Did he go 3-1 to the next hitter immediately after that, to the their 8-hitter? I could be wrong. I did not look this up immediately before coming here, because I remember you're exactly right. That was such an exhale moment that you kind of felt like he had it at that point, and you see his in retrospect, you see his reaction on the mound, and you could almost in his head be like, okay, yeah. And I do remember having a moment, I could be making this up, of kind of the next batter thinking like, he's not going to lose this now, is he? Like, he's not going to do that and then walk the next hitter, right? He's not going to do that, right? But as
the box score, the box score says full count. So I mean, you're right. It certainly wasn't a first pitch, and so I can see it being like, okay, well, wait, who knows? And again, maybe Buehrle, though unflappable, was a bit flapped by the whole. Glove on the head in the moment of like, oh my God, I thought it was gone. And maybe he did take like 15 seconds to gather himself during those 5 pitches. So,
which I think that image does to your first question though, about the general feeling, does sum it up. As a pitcher, when you typically know when you've given one up, and he thought that one was gone. He didn't think he was getting that one back.
Yeah. And then even seeing the juggling, I mean, for goodness sake, to pull it back into the park, but still have it fall, I'm guessing would still be for a hit. We don't have to have a whole nother podcast about whether or not that would have gone down in the scoring book as a hit or an error. I'm guessing in Chicago somehow it still would have been preserved. However, then the debate would take away from how great Buehrle was and whether or not he deserved to have a no-hitter at all. So I'm glad, Dewayne, bless you.
Bless you, Dewayne, and also I guess it does speak, however, to the kind of almost funny, I don't know what the humor-based term is for whatever you want to call those competitive seasons, is that they still had Scott Podsednik starting in center field and hitting pretty well at that point too, and that's and I can't remember if he was if he was starting in center, if he was starting in left and gotten pushed over, but there was actually a group of people. I want to say it was 2 women in the row in the AA or BB row ahead of us who had made a sign specifically for Dewayne Wise. I'm not joking. Like they had a Dewayne Wise sign. I don't know what their deal was. Maybe they had like met him once and liked him. I met him once also at a similar one. He was a really, really nice dude. So maybe that's why I'm thinking of it. But I remember seeing them before the game and we had kind of joked about it because it's such a strange guy to bring a sign to the park for, a fanboy type thing. And they were so excited when he got in the game in the top of the 9th inning. They're putting out, like he's in the game, get the sign, hey. And then of course, without hesitation, the welcome to the game, man. Welcome to your
it makes a play of his life.
History. Sure. And, couldn't from every the one interaction I had with him as a child couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. So.
Mm-hmm. From he hails from Tommy Barbie territory. Tommy Barbie's adopted Columbia, South Carolina. So I told Tommy on his birthday's in off season, go visit the Dewayne Wise statue or plaque in Columbia. It's got to be somewhere. Come on, he made the catch. Okay, well, you got a sneak preview of our world premiere. So I've blown our world premiere, but this is footage now. And again, warning here: if you're listening, you may need to. I don't know how to control this. I'm sorry. So because I'm not a producer, I'm barely a host. I'm a host just because I start these things. So again, volume. So you may need to turn this down or something. I don't want to blow out any speakers, but if I do, you can forward the waybill to Vox LLC in Washington, D.C. They'll be happy to take it for you. But this is shot from me in 1:43 of what turned out to be the last play of the game. Trust me, I wasn't filming from the 5th inning on. I wasn't quite as hardcore and devoted. I'll admit, I've probably tried. I'll admit I do not score games. I wish I had the discipline and the attention span of even a young Malachi Hayes, much less a wise and veteran Malachi Hayes, but I don't. But I also trust I wasn't like filming the entire, like going to a concert and holding my cell phone up either. I sensed this was history, had a camera with me, which was still the holdover from, like the World Series. You want to preserve that when you're there. So 4 years later, yeah, sure. It's like, what's happening? A perfect game? Sure. Let me try and film a few at-bats to see if something happens. So again, volume warning. We'll see what happens here. It's not a long clip before it shakes. Again, also motion sickness warning. If you are operating an airplane, if you are watching and driving, please pull over, stop watching and driving. If you are on a boat, you are going to need Dramamine. There may be a little bit of shaking because after all, it was a perfect game. What else is it supposed to be? All right, we're going to try and add this to the stream and see what happens. Prepare for some volume. Hang out there. We'll be back speaking more quietly in about 1 minute. All right. Okay. I saw the volume control. All right. Well, I'm glad. Okay. Now you can remember to take your hazards off, pull back onto the road now that you're able to safely drive once again. Come and join the soft-spoken Malachi Hayes and Brett Ballantini as we conclude our perfect game. But at any rate, obviously, those last 2 batters, you're feeling like perhaps there's a little bit more destiny involved. Despite the prodigious 338 average from Jason Bartlett, you felt like, okay, listen, anything near the plate is going to be called. There's going to be pressure on Bartlett, and just something's going to happen in the White Sox favor. And again, something did happen, like the 10th bit of weak contact, a fairly weak dribbler to Alisei, to his credit. Smooth as pretty much always, and history.
Yeah, man, the audio does it justice, though. I mean, I still think to this day the only other moment of just pure electricity in a crowd that I can that I've ever been in attendance for that can match that was the peak of the rebuild. Good old Leury Garcia's three-run homer in the 2021 ALDS, and let me tell you, that was fueled by a lot more alcohol than this one was on a sunny Sunday afternoon in July. So it really was something I'm sure shit never going to see that again. So
Yeah.
Still taking.
Yeah.
I'll still watch those highlights and taking that noise every chance I get.
Yeah. For me, the blackout game a year earlier, certainly, and that was maybe even more just atmospheric freak out. I know they were also doing, blackout for Leury as well. World Series, even, as certainly the peak moments of the two World Series wins, would have to match it. But yeah, I can't think of much because this is, well, you can't say it's more unique, Malachi, than a World Series win. But I mean, this is something unique that none of us thought okay, you did, but most of the rest of us did not drive to the park and walk in thinking we were going to see or come close to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there is some of that disbelief that just makes you think, my dad absolutely lost his mind. I think 75% of the noise you hear in that clip is him screaming and running up and down the aisles. But I mean, everyone else around us, we're all best friends all of a sudden. We're all hugging each other, before we leave, because it's like, oh my gosh, we had this shared experience. It's not like surviving a plane crash, but it certainly is some kind of weird bonding where it's like, oh my God, we all sat here together and we witnessed this. So yeah, you're right. It's not something we will see again. It's not a spoiler alert for any of you going to the game, like even today. But yeah, I mean, that's what makes this so miraculous is the odds of it happening are so microscopic that there's a decent chance that every single one of the hundreds of thousands listening and watching Malachi will not get to witness it. Certainly not for their team at home in their home park with one of their favorite pitchers, all of that happening. So, hey, me and you, one of the 450,000 claimed, and in all reality, was it probably like 20,000 or so? Let's see what it says here. The claim is 28,000 people, so probably that accounts for also no shows, but south of capacity, even as the White Sox are making their charge to first place. And hey,
but I mean, that's maybe what's part of the magic of that kind of electricity too, is that it's easy to come up with a lot of yelling and screaming when you're getting 40,000 people jazzed for a playoff game at 7 p.m. on a Sunday night and flashing the lights on, all that. But to get everyone like that on like I said, summer break afternoon in the dog days of July is slightly different. It's just like I said, the expectation's not there, and it makes everything in some ways almost a little bit pure because you're really not expecting anything out of it going into it.
Yeah. We've had such fun discussing this game and trying to modulate our audio. And as we're talking, I'm typing up my one ad for a multimedia producer, Malachi, that probably what I thought was going to carry a lot more weight in this podcast. We'll probably just skip as we're starting to push an hour here. Obviously, we were going on the docket to talk a little bit about the likelihood of the Hall of Fame for Mark Buehrle. We can touch on it, though, because certainly these types of things, whether they should count or not, they do count. People don't consider postseason wins as part of your career win total, although you can make an argument, they should. Those are wins, and those are some really important wins. The fact that Mark Buehrle is one of the very few individuals to have both a no-hitter and a perfect game, should it be what you lead your resume with? Maybe not necessarily in terms of the medal and the slogging day in and day out and compiling war of a career, but it doesn't hurt the case. And the fact that he has been so far overlooked, though still lingering on the ballot, is a shame. I know me, of course, because I'm just so innately smart, Malachi. I always knew he should be a Hall of Famer. You have admitted that you've swung a little bit on that, but you're also feeling like Mark Buehrle has a very legit Hall of Fame case.
Yeah, and I think that, the multiple no-hitters are a part of it. Is like, his case rests on one of kind of just being a unicorn, being a truly one-of-a-kind player who was very, very good and kind of borderline Hall of Fame on numbers alone, but his case rests on being one of those guys who gets pushed over the finish line by how many hitters. I mean, you look at the company of pitchers who have multiple no hitters, and it's the Nolan Ryans and Sandy Koufaxes and Homer Baileys, I guess, and Tim Lincecums of the world. It's mostly guys who are, if not aren't inner circle Hall of Famers, were Hall of Famers at their peak. He did it all while throwing about 83 miles an hour. I think that perfect game, I think it's six strikeouts, which is still, I don't think there's been another perfect game with fewer than 8 or 9 strikeouts, even going back to, the way early days and stuff like that. So even amongst no hitters and perfect games, that was a pretty unique one. And just the way he went about his business, man, it's something we're not going to see again for a long time if we ever see it again. And I think it's something we might not have appreciated. I certainly didn't towards the tail end of his career, but now that we're in this era of everybody throwing, 99 miles an hour, striking out 12 and leaving after 4 innings, he's really the type of pitcher that, even in a different era was pretty unique. And I think the level to which that is unique in a vacuum is a little bit easier to see now that there's not even anybody else in the vicinity. And you can argue whether that's worth a plaque in Cooperstown. I think when you put that in aggregate with the things like the 200 wins, the 15 straight seasons of 200 innings pitched, those are accomplishments that are Hall of Fame worthy in my opinion. So that's my view.
Yeah, it's not just my non-analyst eye what Malachi is saying. It's also that it's just really hard to tell when Mark Buehrle's throwing a fastball versus when he's necessarily throwing his other stuff. So it's hard to pick up on that Jason Bartlett at bat, exactly what he might have been doing to switch up and defy what Ramon Castro told me in terms of like tripling or even quadrupling up on changeups. It's just a little bit hard to tell. And he said, okay, here it is, see what you can do with it. And on that day, nobody could do anything with it. And, not just necessarily multiple no-hitters. I think the list is maybe 3-ish of someone who's thrown a no-hitter and a perfect game. So, I mean, those lists are short no matter really how you dice it up. So, I mean, he's a unicorn in a lot of ways, including sliding on the tarp during rain delays. So he's just a good guy. He's the type of guy that you think should be in the Hall of Fame on a number of levels, which you very eloquently outlined, including just, I love the game. I'm not going to die for the game. I'm not going to hold on forever to pitch in the game, but I love the game enough that it should be fun. We probably need a little bit more of that in baseball, despite the Manfredization of baseball today. We probably need it more than ever. So, voters, come on, perk up, wake up. Hey, we got more of these Dish Deluxes coming. We got quite a few planned. We're going to take a look back at another very unique item in White Sox history, a team that held first place for all of July. We're going to talk about the best July team in White Sox history. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're going to have to guess. It's one that's near and dear to my heart. We're going to be talking Field of Dreams. We're going to be talking maybe that alluded to Lucas Giolito no-hitter, if I can somehow corral both Sam and Janice back to talk to me. And probably do something postseason. And, of course, Mark Liptak's going to play a bigger role on the Deluxes in the offseason because we got to dig up scratch up out of the dirt weird and more mundane things to talk about when it comes to offseason. It doesn't always have to coincide on a day, but, hey, we're doing it today, so let's just keep the streak going. July 23rd, a very special day forever in White Sox fans' hearts. Even when Mark Buehrle's in the Hall of Fame, it'll be even a more special day. But unfortunately, me and Malachi are not holding our breaths, but we can hope. Malachi, well, I hope this has been a decent stroll down memory lane for you. And hey, I was happy to be there at the game with you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. Always who knew? Hey, 14 years later, also we could be in this moment, right?
Yes. Okay. I promise. Next perfect game we see at Sox Park, I'll find a way to be in the park with you. But just tell me when it's coming because I'm going to need some heads up.
I'll check my dreams. We'll see what happens.
Come on back, Jimmy Lambert. All right. Well, this concludes Dish Deluxe number 2. Again, probably a couple times a month. We'll see if everybody loves them and everybody decides to put the hazards on and drive off the road when it comes up on your pod list player. Cool. Great. Then we'll do more of them. Otherwise, planning and coming here and there. Malachi, I'm sure will come on for something else, some other magical game that we somehow were both together at, or maybe one that he just decided to see himself. Perhaps one day we'll even lionize Larry Garcia. I think we just need a little bit of time. I think we just got to let things simmer down. But who knows? We'll bring Larry Garcia back to discuss his one most massive clout in his major league career, and that short moment where we thought everything was going to be right with the world and the White Sox would upend the Houston Astros and win the World Series just, oh my God, 2 years ago. Oh boy, we've all gotten so much older since then. Malachi, thanks for doing this with me. Thanks for everybody listening, following up on our newest in the pantheon of Fans First Sports Network podcasts on behalf of Southside Sox and Sox Populi and whatever the else we're representing. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I promise to have better value next time I decide to introduce a world premiere clip. But let's wind this up before an hour passes. Thank you for being with us, and we'll do this again, soon with another special guest from the Sox Pop pantheon.